Hey, this is Morgan from MorganOnScience.com and MetaMorgan on Twitter, and today I'm doing another episode in the series talking about success and effectiveness of scientists as people and how to maximize that success ultimately. My goal is to come to a conclusion that helps people really see that in a new way. So today I want to talk about two books that I've been reading. One is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and the other is Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So you may have heard of the book by Stephen Covey, but you probably haven't heard of the book by Maxwell Maltz, at least not that many people have. It's called, again, Psycho-Cybernetics. And it's a tremendous book. It was, I think, Maxwell Maltz sort of founded the modern, quote, self-help movement, and I know self-help has a lot of weird connotations with it, but I think self-help is important if it helps you become a better person. And what Maxwell Maltz points out, he had studied people who had plastic surgery. He was a plastic surgeon who helped correct facial defects, and so people would come to him to get him to correct these defects, these issues that they had. And what he observed is that some people, when they had the surgery, they would go away feeling a lot better and having much better self-esteem, but others wouldn't even believe that they had had surgery. They would look in the mirror and they didn't see any change, even though to everybody else they had obviously changed. And so he went into the principles of what are the mental changes that a person needs to make for self-esteem and efficacy in the world. And it's a really interesting study. I highly recommend it if you have a chance to read that book. But in any case, so out of these two books, today I want to talk about a principle actually from Stephen Covey's book, which it also comes from Maxwell Maltz, and it's the idea of proactivity, being proactive in your life rather than reactive. So it teaches that, you know, in any situation, there's your environment, your situation, whatever's happening around you, and then that's A, and over here is B, your reactions to that situation, to that environment. And you know what's interesting is that many people have come to believe that A leads directly to B, that we are a product of our environment, of our genetics, of our situations, and that there's nothing we can do about that. That the only thing we can do is continue being a product, continue reacting. And so if somebody comes up and says something mean or whatever, that you have to react likewise back. You have to say something mean back or whatever. But what Covey points out is that some people he uses the example of somebody who was in the Nazi prison camps, who actually figured out that, yes, it was a terrible environment around him, but he still had this in-between thing that he could choose how he was responding. That his environment, his awful environment around him in this Nazi prison camp, death camp, didn't have to control who he was on the inside. And that we have this choice to make about who we are and what our principles are, and that should actually be driving our reactions, not the environment, the genes, the whatever. And so that we really need to be proactive is actually activating that thinking, that idealism, that sense of who we are fundamentally, instead of just reacting. And I think it's a tremendously powerful concept. And so what I want to talk about briefly, though, is how Hollywood really, I think, thwarts our ability to do that, for at least for a lot of us. So when I was young, I saw too much TV, unfortunately. It was just a byproduct of my own family situation. And so I think I had a very, very deeply ingrained message up until fairly recently in my life that, yes, I was a product of my genetics and my upbringing, and that, you know, I couldn't really fundamentally change who I was. But what I realized is that that's just a message. That is just a message that I got from Hollywood, from movies, and that many people get that message. And I think it's, I think there's a reason for that message in Hollywood, is that if somebody is truly proactive, if they're choosing how to correctly react based on inner principles and their inner guide, rather than just being in reactive mode, that they become a character very much like Spock on Star Trek. And Spock on Star Trek, I mean, he's a great component of the crew, but by himself, he doesn't make a very interesting character. It's his interplay with the other characters that makes him interesting. But if everybody in all of TV and movies were like Spock and just, analyze things logically and rationally, and didn't have these big emotional reactions, most movies and most TV would be pretty boring. So, TV and movies make a lot out of people and how they react to their circumstances and their environment, and a lot of times people get in a bad situation in a movie and then eventually through a series of reactions come to some redemption. And so I think we hear that message again and again, that we are a product of our environment, and we hear it through Hollywood. And I think that's especially negative for a science career, is having that notion that that's how science is done too, that we're sort of a product of the lab that we come from, we're a product of the training we received, we're a product of how good of a writer we are or whatever, and that it's all up to these external factors of what research we happen to be doing, and where we came from, rather than who we are on the inside, that affect how productive, how happy we are as a scientist. So I think I'll leave you with that today, but I think it's an important thing to ask yourself, are you being that proactive person who's really choosing who you are as a scientist, or are you just being a product of the training that you came from, the lab that you came from, or the scientific thing that's in vogue today, or whatever. So I'd love to hear your comments and your feedback on that question. So please leave your comments in the blog, and you can come to morganonscience.com if you want to leave those comments, or also find me at MetaMorgan on Twitter, and then I'll be coming back at you tomorrow with a discussion about this proactive notion and the school system. So until then, have a great day. Bye-bye.